Hello, it's me, Christine. Welcome to my little crime corner. It's not easy working with your spouse or significant other, seeing them at home in the morning, then going to work at the same place, spending the whole day together, then going home together doesn't leave a lot of room for alone time. I've been working at the same place as my significant other for several years, and so far so good. It doesn't work for most people, but it does work for some. It worked for Ruby and Earl Morris, who started and ran their own accounting and tax preparation business in Arizona. They had been married for more than 20 years and had 3 adult children together. They had a 32-year-old son named Randall, who was married with his own family and worked in the service industry, and 2 daughters, Donna Kay, who was 28 and was pursuing a country music career, and Cindy, who was 23, who worked as a waitress. Their business that they started themselves and built up from nothing did very well, and they were able to raise their children very comfortably in a large, luxurious home right outside of Phoenix. On June 4th, 1989, Earl was headed to California to see his oldest daughter, Donna Kay, who was performing in a concert. Donna Kay was a very talented singer and definitely a rising star on the scene. Ruby had decided to not attend the concert to see Donna Kay because she had already made plans with her younger daughter Cindy to go shopping with her to buy some furniture for her new home. Cindy had waited and waited on Sunday for her mom to come over, but Ruby never showed up. This was definitely not like Ruby to not show up for a scheduled appointment, and the fact that she didn't even call Cindy to say she was running late or wasn't coming really worried Cindy. So Cindy drove over to her parents' home just to make sure everything was okay. She was hoping to find her mother maybe sleeping or just working around the house, thinking that maybe she had just lost track of time. But when Cindy showed up and walked in, she found the home empty. She did find that the home's alarm system had been turned off, which was unusual considering no one was home the time that you would turn the alarm system on. And after looking around, Cindy noticed that her mother's purse was missing, indicating that Ruby might have left since she certainly wouldn't leave home without it. But when she looked in the garage, she found that her mother's car was still there, but recalls it being parked away from its usual spot. Cindy then walked upstairs and immediately knew that something was wrong. She had spotted several things that were noticeably out of place. She found the faucet of the bathtub dripping, a pile of dirty clothes on top and inside the washing machine, and a carpet cleaner that was left in the corner. This was all very out of the ordinary because her mother was a meticulously neat person and lived her life with everything in its specific place. More and more worried about the disarray of the home and her growing anxiety over her missing mother, Cindy then checked the upstairs closet where she knew her parents had kept a .22 caliber pistol hidden. The pistol was missing. Cindy first called her sister Donna Kay, then immediately called the police. Initially, the police were not the most helpful. They had suggested that she probably just stepped out and went shopping and that she'd probably be back in a few hours and not to worry. We've heard this before. Telling me that it's nothing to worry about only gives me something to worry about. After several hours passed, the police then called Earl to tell him that Ruby was missing. Earl then called Cindy and told her that he would immediately head home from California. Earl took his time driving home, like a suspiciously long time, and Cindy became concerned that something had happened to him too. He had finally arrived and the police were already waiting for him. During the police interview, they asked Earl if he and Ruby had ever had any serious fights or gotten into any disputes during their marriage. And Earl told police that no, not really. He said that they had a great relationship, but, argued here and there. What couple doesn't? I feel like that's not too out of the ordinary, and neither did police. The police then asked if Ruby had ever just up and left before, and Earl said, "Oh yeah, several times." But she usually at least calls first. When asked about the .22 caliber pistol that Cindy had discovered was missing, Earl said that, yeah, he knew it was missing from its place in the closet. He said that was where he had seen it last, but he couldn't account for its current whereabouts. Finally confronted about why it took him so long to get back to Arizona from California, Earl had told police that his car had broken down, so he had to rent one to finish the trip. However, upon an inspection of the rental car, the detective that opened the trunk found a suitcase with a luggage tag on it from a recent flight from San Diego to Phoenix. But when investigators checked the flight logs, Earl Morris was not on any plane's manifest. But there was someone named G. Morris on the flight. So police showed the flight crew a collection of photos including Earl Morris, asking them if they recognized anyone from their recent flights. One of the flight attendants pointed him out right away and said she definitely remembered him because of the terrible quality of his toupee. Come on, Earl. Police felt that many parts of his story weren't adding up and decided to focus their search more on the Morris' home, hoping to find more clues. They were specifically looking for any signs of foul play or anything that might indicate a fight or a struggle that Ruby might have been involved in. They hadn't noticed anything during their initial search, but that's because they weren't necessarily looking for it at that point. Remember, Earl really wasn't a suspect until police had noticed things like the luggage tag on his bag and the inconsistencies in his recount of the events. During their second visit to search the home, investigators sprayed luminol all throughout Ruby and Earl's bedroom, and the headboard lit up. It was a fine mist pattern consistent with the high velocity of a gunshot. Tiny bloodstains were found on the mattress, as well as inside the mattress when cut open. When investigators went to the master bathroom, they sprayed luminol over every surface and found evidence of a large amount of blood in the bathtub. Remember, Cindy had found the faucet dripping when she went to her parents' home in search of Ruby. Blood was found on several places of the bedroom carpet, as well as on the cement patio right outside Ruby and Earl's bedroom. Just because blood was found in the Morris' home didn't necessarily mean it belonged to Ruby, but I mean, that would be my first guess. Because it was heavily suspected to be the blood of Ruby Morris, investigators needed to conduct a blood test, but since Ruby wasn't physically there, they were unable to obtain a sample directly from her. They ended up taking a sample from her children, and when they compared the sample found in the bedroom to the sample taken from her daughter Cindy and son Randall, they found one matching band. This would indicate that the blood found on the headboard, mattress, carpet, bathtub, and cement patio belonged to Ruby Morris. While looking over the results from the testing, scientists came across something strange. When Earl's DNA profile was compared to Cindy's, there were no matching bands. This would indicate that Earl was not Cindy's biological father. Earl's DNA profile was then compared to Randall's, and again, no matching bands. Earl was not Randall's biological father either. Randall's DNA actually matched that of Ruby's father, Clyde Williams. When the investigators in Tennessee found out about this, Clyde Williams was arrested and charged with incest. According to the DNA results, Clyde had assaulted Ruby when she was only 14 years old. After giving birth to Randall, Ruby passed him off as her brother until she married Earl. Earl then adopted Randall and raised and treated him like his own son. According to Cindy and Randall, Ruby had been depressed for a long time because she had found out about an affair Earl was having with a woman named Peggy, who was also Ruby's sister. Earl and Peggy were caught once by Ruby and Cindy when they were in the Phoenix airport. Peggy had secretly flown to Phoenix to meet up with Earl, and Ruby was fed up. She confronted Earl about the affair, and he refused to end it. Unbelievable Earl. Real piece of work. Although she was living in Louisiana at the time, police felt that Ruby's sister Peggy had the motive and opportunity to hurt Ruby. It was discovered that Peggy had planned to go to San Diego on the weekend that Ruby went missing, and phone records showed that Earl had called her several times in the days leading up to Ruby's disappearance. Peggy had told police that she did in fact have plans to meet Earl in San Diego just days after Ruby went missing, but she had conveniently missed her flight. We know that Earl did not miss his flight because police had found the luggage tag, as well as confirmation from the flight attendant that he was in fact on the flight. On top of all this, his car was also found in the airport's parking lot. When looking at the car, it appeared to be clean, but almost too clean. Investigators sprayed luminol all over the seats and the floors, and found a large blood stain on the passenger side seat and floor. Unlike the small spatters found in the Morris's bedroom, the amount found in the car was such a huge amount. Investigators were convinced that whoever's blood this was, they lost so much they would not have been able to survive. Testing concluded that the blood found in the car matched that of the blood found in the bedroom, which we know belonged to Ruby. Because they still didn't have a physical body, police began broadening their search for clues. Police knew the Morrises had a boat, which was stored at a San Diego marina. This would presumably give Earl a reason to be in San Diego, if not for his affair, for his boat. When speaking to the marina employees, police found out that Earl was there on June 5th and confirmed that he had taken his boat out on the water. As you can imagine, police felt this to be a strong lead and were interested in checking out his boat. But when they went in for their search, they discovered that the boat was missing. Of course it was. Police then reached out to the Coast Guard for help in locating the Morrises' boat. The Coast Guard then informed them about a suspicious boat fire that had occurred 13 miles off the coast on June 5th. The Coast Guard said there were no survivors, since no one was found in or around the boat when it burned and sunk. What was suspicious about the fire was that it burned from the center out, suggesting that it was intentionally set. A boat fire would typically start from something like a mechanical issue, such as an engine fire or something involving the fuel line, which would make the starting point of the fire somewhere on the side or the back end, depending on the type of boat or issue. I can't think of any reason for a fire to start at a boat center unless there was a deliberate effort to start a fire. The Coast Guard had indicated that a lantern fell or was knocked over, spilling fuel all over the interior, causing such a burn pattern. A check on marina records had turned up a rental receipt from 9:15 in the morning of June 5th for a small boat and was signed by none other than Earl Morris. Why would someone who owned a boat go to the same marina where their boat is stored and rent a much smaller, much less fun boat? I can think of a reason. Records show that the small boat was returned at noon on the same day, which was after the boat fire off the marina. Too many things were pointing investigators in the direction of Ruby being on that burning boat. They were convinced that she was among the wreckage at the bottom of the ocean. They had no body, but they had blood evidence, hopefully enough to convince a jury that Ruby Morris had been murdered. Earl was then arrested and charged with murder. During the trial in 1991, the prosecution had to convince the jury that a murder had taken place without proof of the body or the victim. They had shown all the physical evidence that they had, in hopes that the jury would see that this horrendous crime had taken place, and that Earl had gone through extreme lengths to cover it up. They had said that on June 4th, Earl had entered the bedroom and shot Ruby twice in the head with the .22 caliber pistol, which they knew he had kept hidden in the closet. This would account for the fine mist spray that the luminol had indicated on the headboard. He then dragged Ruby to the bathroom, leaving the blood spots on the carpet and in the bathtub. He tried to remove as much blood as he could from her body in the bathtub, then changed her clothes. He had left the faucet in the bathtub still dripping when Cindy found it the next day. He then put a baseball hat on Ruby and carried her out to the garage, where he put her in the passenger side of his car. He went back to the bedroom and tried to remove the blood from the headboard, carpet, and bathroom. He didn't do a good job because luminol revealed the bloodstains right away. He then drove to San Diego with Ruby slumped over in the passenger seat. Once at the San Diego marina, he towed his boat over to the launch, carried Ruby over, placed her in the boat, along with some bloody bedsheets, the pistol, as well as a canister of gasoline, and a small lantern, much like the one the Coast Guard had presumed had been knocked over in order to start the fire. Mind you, he is doing this at 9 in the morning. The absolute nerve. He then went into the office where he rented the smaller boat, which he then attached to the side of the boat he owned, and sailed off. As soon as he was 13 miles offshore, he looked around and began setting up the scene. He poured the gasoline from the canister all over Ruby and all over the inside of the boat. He then grabbed the lantern, went to the small rental, lit the lantern, threw it onto his boat's deck, immediately engulfing it in flames. Earl quickly sailed away before being spotted by anyone. By the time the Coast Guard had realized what was going on, the boat and everything on it burned, sank to the ocean's floor, and was never recovered. During the trial, Earl's defense delivered a bombshell. Earl had actually admitted that his wife was dead and that he had placed her body on his boat and intentionally burned and sank it. But he insisted that he did not kill his wife. Earl said that Ruby had committed suicide because she felt immense guilt over the fact that 2 of her children were not biologically Earl's, and that she was experiencing severe depression over Earl's affair with her sister Peggy, the affair that Earl refused to end. On the stand, Earl said that he believed he would be blamed for her death, and thought that the best thing to do in order to get the attention off of him, instead of calling the police or literally anything else, he said he came up with the plan to get rid of her body because in his mind, he thought this would lead to less questions and the suspicion would be off of him. Really now, I know what'll get police off my back. A cover-up. The prosecution, up until that point, only had circumstantial evidence that Ruby was dead. No one had actually confirmed it until now. Earl had described how he had entered the bedroom and found Ruby lying there with a gunshot wound to her left temple. This would not have been easy, let alone if possible, because Ruby was right-handed. So you take your right hand. It's not easy. My arms are long, so you may think it's possible. It's not. Earl said that she had used the .22 caliber pistol that was still missing. If she had actually done this to herself, you'd think that if he was innocent, the gun would have been tested and it would have showed that it was not fired by him and that there would be gunpowder residue on her hands and none on his. But they weren't able to test this because, again, gun was still missing. At the trial, prosecution described it being impossible for Ruby, a right-handed person, to shoot herself on the left side of her head, especially with something like a .22 caliber pistol, since it did have a long barrel. Analysts also found 2 separate layers of blood spatter going in 2 different directions. This would mean that in order to distinguish the two, one of the layers, the first layer, would have had to have been dry first. There is no way that Ruby would have been physically able to shoot herself twice, leaving enough time in between for the first layer of blood to dry on the headboard. Earl was also the only person to admit to seeing Ruby's deceased body because the investigators only had the blood evidence from the bedroom and the car. Just a few months shy of their 30th wedding anniversary, during the 1989 confrontation at the Phoenix airport, Ruby announced that she wanted a divorce. She had said that a 50-50 split wasn't acceptable. She wanted 3/4. She then alluded that if her terms were not met, she would turn Earl into the IRS for filling out fraudulent tax returns. Remember, they had an accounting and tax preparation business. This would ruin him. Also, come to think of it, being turned into the IRS would ruin anybody. They believe that because Earl was embarrassed about his affair with Ruby's sister Peggy being exposed and him refusing to end it, on top of the threat to turn him into the IRS, were what pushed him over the edge to kill Ruby. Earl was adamant that it was suicide and he had only attempted to cover it up in order to take the blame off of himself. The jury did not buy this, and after a 6-week trial, the jury found Earl Morris guilty of murder. The judge gave him a minimum of 25 years in prison and fined him $205,500 for court and investigative costs. Following the trial, their daughter Donna Kay said, "There's really no winners or losers in a situation like this." Which, I mean, yeah, she really lost both of her parents for no reason. Earl was just so stubborn and so selfish to leave his children without a mother. The last I was able to find at the time of researching this case, Earl was up for parole in 2018, but his request was denied. In 2003, Ruby's sister Peggy had passed away and was buried next to Ruby's stone in Bell Vernon Cemetery in Friendship, Tennessee. She had continued to deny her affair with Earl for the rest of her life. Earl Morris is currently serving his life sentence in Arizona State Prison and spends his time in prison as a food service worker and painter, making between 20 and 50 cents an hour. The big bucks. This was an incredibly sad case and just an unnecessary loss of life. It was so unfair to Ruby's children, who ended up losing both of their parents in the process. Let me know what you think of this case, because that is all I have for you today. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you learned something, and I will see you in the next one. Bye. Real piece of work.